Hello World Explorers, thanks for joining us again and welcome back to another exciting and informative video on our YouTube channel. If you are joining us for the first time, we want to thank you for watching. In this episode, we shall be looking as to the reason why France Afrique is collapsing in front of our own eyes. I will dive into specifics, bring you some perspective and also analytical information as to what experts say and why others believe, and experts around the world, that the current president of France, Emmanuel Macron, can't escape the blame for France's failures in the continent of Africa. I will encourage you to watch this video to the end for clarity and better understanding. So without any much delay, let's just dive straight into it. President Emmanuel Macron is facing incredible pressure from home. If you look at events in Guinea, in Mali and Burkina Faso and Gabon, more importantly in Niger has exposed France, has stressed the French hegemonic aspect in the region, and also exposed France to an extent that you begin to imagine that the way it looks strong in the outside, that's not how it looks strong in the inside. Niger has weakened France's foreign policy and made France to be a laughingstock on the global stage.
France says it will begin withdrawing its troops from Niger this week. The French army is expected to complete the withdrawal by the end of the year. President Emmanuel Macron announced the decision 10 days ago after mass protests in Niger calling for the French ambassador and all its troops to leave. French soldiers were there as part of the fight against armed groups across the Sahel region.
Ever since they seized power in late July, Niger's military rulers and their supporters have been demanding French soldiers' withdrawal from the country. Now, 10 days after Emmanuel Macron gave in to their demands and recalled the French ambassador, the French army announced it would begin to disengage this week, in good order, safely and in coordination with the Nigerians. Niger's military regime reacted on social media to say that the withdrawal would be carried out in accordance with its interests and on its terms. It specified that the 400 French soldiers based in Walam will be the first to pack up.
If you look at other aspects, most recently, Emmanuel Macron was the recipient of a letter coming nearly from 100 senators from across France's political spectrum. The signatories lamented the failures and setback of the Republic policy in Africa in recent years and called on President to rethink his French strategy on the continent of Africa. The letter listing some of the failures that has occurred in Africa. For example, the rejection of France by Mali, the Central African Republic, and also Burkina Faso, and most recently Niger. The group also, the cross-party group, warned that there could be more trouble in store with Ivory Coast and also Senegal, where anti-French sentiment is growing. It continued to point out that then there is North Africa, where relations with Morocco and Tunisia aren't what they were, and in the case of Algeria, they are positively hostile and with regards to their relationship with France. Some of these deterioration can be attributed, the letter pointed out, to Russia's interference. On a recent visit to Moscow, Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune called Vladimir Putin a friend of humanity, but France also bears some of the responsibility for its waning influence in the continent of Africa and its barbaric influence in the region, based on historical information as we've proven on this channel. Moving forward, the 94 senators emphasized that they weren't pinning for the days of France Afrique, but they did seek enlightenment on what, if any, strategy Macron had in Africa. Militarily, culturally and linguistically, France seemed to be withdrawing from the continent of Africa, and consequently, stated the letter, in regards to recent information, France Afrique has been replaced by, according to the letter, military Russian Afrique, or economic Chinese Afrique, or diplomatic American Afrique, based on their senators' analysis. If you look at the pressure back home, considering France's failure with regards to his foreign policy in Africa, as France becomes a laughingstock with regards to his operation by insisting that an ambassador will stay in Niger, of which France understands what the Vienna Accord says with regard to diplomatic immunity. I think France's exposure and weakness has been exacerbated with regards to what Niger has exposed France's presence in the region, and show other African countries who are francophone that it is not so strong in the outside as it is in the inside. Moving forward, Sébastien Lecornu, France's Minister for Armed Forces, responded to the letter on behalf of the military, rejecting the notion that Operation Balkhane, which the senator criticized, had been a defeat. The anti-jihadist operation, launched in Sahel region of Africa by former President François Hollande on August 2014, and which also involved a small British military presence, officially ended last November, having costed the life of over 58 soldiers. Based on that report, Balkhane was not a failure. It's wrong to say that, according to Lecornu, who spoke to La Figaro in France. It wasn't a military failure at all. He answered, there is no particular aspect. The French army was not defeated. Was there a political failure? It is to France's credit that it fought terrorism. I never forget that we lost 58 soldiers, based on Lecornu's response to that particular letter coming from those senators. That didn't answer the question of what Operation Balkhane was a political failure. Moving ahead, even Macron's staunchest supporters, of which there aren't increasingly few in France, will be hard pressed to say that he has been successful in Africa, and yet he has channeled much of his energy into re-establishing French influence on the continent. He made his first visit to Africa on May 2017, barely a fortnight after his election as president, and there have been 17 more sorties south to press the flesh with various heads of states with regards to his own perspective with regards to relationship with Africa. Recently, in March this year, President Emmanuel Macron, on the eve of another trip to Africa, spoke from the Élysée Palace of a new vision of a partnership with African countries. This entails reducing France's military presence, but the president stressed the move should not be seen as a withdrawal or disengagement as well. It was a change in approach to cooperate differently. This approach has been instigated by Macron and Macron alone, which may explain its abject failure. Last year, he replaced his veteran foreign minister Jean-Yves Le Drian with Catherine Colonna, the former ambassador to the United Kingdom, thereby losing a vast experienced diplomat and also who was well versed in African politics. Moving ahead, on top of that decision, Macron also announced a controversial reform of the diplomatic corps, the third largest in the world behind the United States of America and China, phased out plenipotentiary and ambassadors and foreign affairs advisors and replacing them with a new state corps. The changes, which will take effect later this year, will mean that senior civil servants no longer spend their careers in a specific post but will be transferred at irregular intervals. Looking forward, the reform prompted a rare strike by diplomats who believe it will undermine knowledge and expertise in countries that has been cultivated over many years. Le Drian was said to have expressed his reservation about the shake-up in assessing the reform. America's Foreign Policy Research Institute concluded that Macron has little considerations of the opinions of those involved and even less of his own opponents, creating a sense of disheartenment and also confusion in the region and across the continent of Africa. In his speech from the Élysée earlier this year, Macron declared it has ambitions to usher in a new dawn of cooperation between France and Africa, one built on respectful and balanced and responsible relations, to fighting together for common cause, defend our own interests and also help African countries to succeed. But it seems increasingly that Africa doesn't want France's help any longer. As the 94 senators pointed out in their letter, the age of France-Afrique is over, and it is China's, Russia and American done scrambling for Africa. We, France, have no understanding in regards to how the African continent operates based on our years that we've spent there. If you look at France's strategy in Africa, has been a total failure. Considering its years of presence in the region, France failed to invest or even make significant contribution in the political and also economic development of those regions. France instead focused on actually extorting those regions, and the consequences of that is what France is facing. If you look at China's presence, the don't ask, don't tell strategy that France employed, though could be criticized in some other ways. However, China's investment and also contribution in the continent of Africa in terms of infrastructure from all areas across the region, using China's Exim Bank and the contribution it made in the region of Africa. China has made significant contribution in the infrastructural development of Africa. Whether you like it or not, China has made a huge impact in the region, considering their presence. China-African relations and economic development has skyrocketed recently. Apart from the COVID-19 and other aspects, France at the moment is falling behind. We want to thank you for watching. Hopefully we've informed you regards to the pressure faced by the current French president at home and abroad, and that what Mali and Burkina Faso have currently showed France and Guinea and also Niger may seem not to stop from that end, as the letter also clearly explains that this is not going to happen just overnight, that others may follow. We're looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Well, we're joined on set by correspondent Nicholas Hack, who has covered the story extensively for us. Nicholas, the country's still reeling, isn't it, from a brutal attack that took place just a few days ago. It shows just how challenging this fight is against armed groups.
It is really challenging. It's going to be even more challenging in the days to come when we'll see all the French soldiers leave the country. Now, this operation to leave the country started early this morning, Marlene, around 4 a.m. And it started with these 2 battalions of French forces that are based in Walam and in Tabare Bare, which is by the Niger-Mali border, an area where there's attacks from armed groups linked to the ISIL affiliate in the area called the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara. Now, they were there previous to the coup as part of an operation called Operation Almau, helping Niger's forces to fight off these armed groups. Now, it's interesting that you mentioned this attack that happened a few days ago, because it happened just kilometers away from where the French forces were. And in normal circumstances, they would have helped Niger's forces to counter the attack. But because those military ties have been cut, they're now heading home. So they're going to be taking a road journey to Niamey in the hours to come. It's just 100 kilometers long, very short, but high in risk. It's very dangerous. So it's going to take 2 days for them to get there. And then they'll board a plane, according to Paris, and head back straight to France. But still, there'll be 1,000 soldiers on the ground that will have to leave the country before the end of the year.
So, Nicholas, where does this leave Niger and its security situation?
Well, I've been making a few calls in Niger to find out what has been the reaction of people there. Now, of course, there's the diplomatic and the kind of state reaction from the junta, who have essentially said no comment, we're happy for them to leave, and the withdrawal period, which is before the end of the year, is not soon enough. They want them to go as soon as possible. But for the people in Niger, they have greater concerns, because since this coup happened, electricity is cut. They have very little access to water. This is already a country where most people live on less than $2 a day. And so the sanctions put in place by the international community seems to be biting this country. This country, which is extraordinary because it is extremely rich in uranium. Uranium used to power the nuclear power plants in Europe that keeps Europeans warm, in a country, Niger, where most people live on less than $2 a day. So their concerns is the economy and trying to set that back into motion.
Okay, thank you for that. Nicholas Hack here in the studio with us.
It's specified that the 400 French soldiers based in Walam will be the first to pack up, and the Niamey airbase, where most of the French troops are stationed, will be dismantled by the end of the year. The decision ends months of tense standoff between the French government and Niger's post-coup military regime, which France does not recognise. French troops were in Niger as part of a wider fight against jihadists across the Sahel region. Some 1,400 soldiers are currently based in the country. Most are in Niamey, others in Walam and in Ayoru, near the borders with Mali and Burkina Faso, where they're deployed alongside local troops. France had reinforced its presence in Niger after Mali and Burkina Faso's military regimes demanded its forces' departure last year. The withdrawal is another blow to France's waning influence in Africa, with its military presence shrinking and anti-French sentiment on the rise.